Everybody, my name is Linda Abraham, and I am the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. Welcome to Ask Me Anything with Michael Robinson, Columbia Business School's MBA Admissions Director. Now, a few valuable pieces of information before we start. Michael or I may ask questions during the AMA and ask you to raise your hands in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel. If by some chance you don't know how to use Zoom, please answer my question, and that is raise your hand if you would like to earn your MBA at Columbia Business School. So raise your hand if you are here because you would like to earn your MBA at Columbia Business School. Okay, great. Most of you are here for the right reasons and know how to use the hand raising feature on Zoom. 6 months into the pandemic, that's great. All right, and we also have a couple of polls for you. I'm going to share the first one right now. When are you planning to apply? This year, next year, or just sometime in the future, which basically means you're not sure. Okay, again, the poll is, when are you planning to apply? This year, next year, or sometime in the future? All right, and we have a great audience here. 89% having voted. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it's 79% are planning to apply this cycle, 19% are planning ahead for next year, and 2% are just saying sometime in the future. Okay, great. And let's see, next results, next poll. Here we go. What program format interests you? The options are traditional August entry, full-time MBA would be the traditional August entry and the January entry, executive MBA or deferred enrollment program. So yeah, forget the full-time MBA, just go for either traditional August entry or January entry. I think it'll be more useful. Sorry about that. Okay, we're at 76% having voted. Let's get it up over 80. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With 86% having voted, here are the results. Traditional August entry, 59%, full-time MBA, 27%, January entry, 5%, executive MBA, 2%, and deferred enrollment, 7%. Okay, that's great. I'm sorry about the error with the full-time MBA. That was not so clear. And then we're gonna have one last poll, I think. And that is, what industry would you like to work in post-MBA? Okay, the options are consulting, entrepreneurship, financial services, nonprofit or social enterprise, and tech, and then other. Okay, we're 87% having voted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And we actually have 92% having voted, so that's a fantastic percentage. Thank you for your participation. 27% are going into consulting, 12% entrepreneurship, 24% financial services, 2% nonprofit or social enterprise, 12% tech, and 24% other. I don't know, Michael, is that surprising to you or pretty much what you would have expected?
Yeah, that's what I expected. So if you think about the way our class looks like at the end of the process, most people end up going into consulting. So that's been ahead of financial services, I'd say, for the past decade. So yeah, this looks about right.
Okay, all right. And with that, I'm thrilled to offer all of our listeners today, our participants, an opportunity to ask questions about Columbia Business School's MBA program. Michael Robinson, who you just briefly heard from, will first present information about the Columbia Business School program and then answer your questions. Michael Robinson is Director of Admissions at CBS. He leads strategic efforts centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and spearheaded outreach efforts to expand the business school's presence in Africa and Southeast Asia. Here's what we're planning for the next 50 minutes or so. Michael has prepared a short presentation, and following the presentation, he'll answer your questions. You can push your questions at any time during the webinar in the question window. I'll choose those questions that I feel have the broadest applicability, and we can go from there. Okay. So thank you, Michael. And the floor is yours. The floor and mic are yours.
Yes. So can you put this screen on, Linda?
Oh, that would be
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
There you go.
yeah. So okay, good. So perfect. Um, so can you just like flash forward one slide? Okay, perfect. So I know this is technically a Q&A, but I thought it might be helpful for me to kind of just like flash through very quickly information session. But one of the things I'm going to do, right, is just kind of focus mostly on how we think as a committee. So I think by table setting in this way, I can get many of your questions answered. So you really get a sense of what we look for when we look at an application, right? And the other advantage of registering for a full session is that like you'll also hear from either current students or alumni depending on the format. So let's go to the next slide. So we talk a lot about being at the very center of business, and that's central to the Columbia experience. And we all know that we live in the world of the pandemic, and right now we have this high flex model at Columbia where about 25% of our student population is on campus at any one time, and they kind of rotate throughout the week. Hopefully, as things get better from a public health perspective, that number will increase. But the plan at this point is that that's the world that we live in. And for those of you who are thinking about the January class, which I'll discuss in a later slide, we hope that everything will be resolved by then, but we will always err on the side of public health. I won't go through all the elements of this, but I just want to talk about one thing here, the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, and also the Phyllis pathway to inclusive leadership. Beyond developing your management skill set and your leadership skill set, we believe very strongly that the impactful leader of the future needs to be an inclusive leader. And essentially, we kind of define that as being able to manage and leverage difference, where you are from a certain country, but if you put that graduate in another country and so on, they still have empathy. They still know how to learn from and teach and help and coach people who are very different from them. So again, that's kind of the key thing about inclusion. Next slide, please. So as Linda kind of mentioned, we have a number of formats, and I will kind of focus for this conversation on the full-time MBA program. So there's an August entry, which is typical, and then an accelerated program which starts in January. And for those of you who are on the call who are college seniors, you can apply as a senior, get admitted, and then pretty much you have 2 to 5 years to start the program. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the January versus August, right? The primary difference for those who are doing this accelerated program is that there is no summer internship. So the people who are in the J-term class are those who can make a very strong case as to why they can achieve their goals without needing a summer internship. That class is also more global. So the class that starts in August has about 40% non-US in terms of the population, and the class that starts in the J-term, it's flipped. So it's about 60 to 65% non-US, so it's much more global. Many of the people there are sponsored by their companies. We have a number of people who come from thriving family businesses, which they hope to kind of scale and grow as a result of them achieving an MBA. So if you are thinking about a significant career transition, it's much easier to make that transition by using a summer internship to help you with that transition. So again, if you're thinking about the J term, if you're thinking that you need a significant internship experience to make your transition happen, the J term might not be the one that's most appropriate for you. Those are the primary differences, but pretty much it's the same program, same number of electives, same number of class credits and so on. So the core things are identical. Next slide, please. And still, next slide, please. So, and again, I know I'm going very quickly because I definitely want to get to questions very quickly. But one of the key things, and I'll start with a negative. I have been doing admissions now for 18 years. And I'd say the most common error or mistake that I see in applications is that the applicant, the candidate, hasn't really done significant due diligence as part of their application process. Where they haven't been thoughtful, they haven't been truly reflective, looking at themselves internally, figuring out exactly what they want to do, short-term, mid-term, long-term, having a clear sense of what they want to get from a program, and then trying to make the right match with the program that's most appropriate for them. So as over the next few slides, right, I'm going to kind of walk you through a due diligence process. So go back a second. So if you're thinking about the full-time faculty, the tenure track faculty, right? Think about the faculty members that are most relevant to you achieving your goals, right? That has to be a core part of the research. Now, we talk a lot at Columbia about matching theory to practice. We have about 300 faculty members on campus, and half of these tenure track faculty, and then next slide, the other half are adjuncts who are industry practitioners, who are leaders in their chosen field, right? So as part of your research, right, if you're looking at our adjuncts, which practitioner interests you the most? Which one is most relevant to what you want to do to achieve your goals? And I like to say that everyone, when they think about the next steps that they need to achieve to become this impactful leader in the future, everyone has some sort of toolkit gap, a skill set gap, or a knowledge gap that they're trying to close, right? So part of your research or due diligence, you have to have a clear understanding of what skill set or toolkit gap do I have, and then what faculty members are most helpful to me in closing that gap. So be they adjunct faculty, the practitioner, or the tenure track full-time faculty. Next slide, please. Now, again, I know I'm flashing through, but that's on purpose. So the one thing I will say about this, that like we have this innovative core curriculum, but the key thing that I want to mention from this slide, right, is that a number of you on this call may have backgrounds and expertise in certain areas where you, with maybe a weekend of study, can pass an exemption exam for one of our required classes. So if you are a CPA, the financial accounting class would be really easy for you. So then why not exempt that class and replace that class with an elective? So you basically start getting into what you need to get into faster than your classmates. Next slide, please. Now, we have at Columbia about 14 areas of concentration, right? So we have this very wide range of electives. There are like 6 areas listed here, some of the more common ones. The thing to keep in mind, though, in terms of due diligence, what area of focus resonates most with you? So you have to kind of think about the 2-year experience as this part of experiential learning, right? So if you're going to maximize your experience in our program, what electives are you taking, right? What electives are most relevant to what you want to do? And that has to be a key part of your research as well. Next slide. and still flash forward, right? Now, a large part of the learning comes from the speakers who are coming to campus, and they're still coming to campus, albeit virtually this semester. So there are ways to kind of get a sense of who are the key speakers coming to campus. And again, like, which speaker would you have gone to had you been at Columbia in the past year? And the other thing that also interests me, as well as someone in admissions reading applications, is that sometimes when you look at the kinds of speakers, some of the more intriguing applicants may already have relationships with comparable speakers. So you could say, okay, well, I would love to. I have strong networks within a certain industry and so on. So I could bring someone from the healthcare space to speak on campus. I could bring someone from the retail space who has a comparable profile to these speakers, and I'd love to bring that person to campus as well. So again, that's a key part of the learning. Next slide, please. Now, the next few slides, I think, are some of the most important. As part of your due diligence, you have to engage with members of the community. And if there's one silver lining to this horrific COVID pandemic, is that there are a lot more opportunities for people to connect with our community, albeit virtually. So before, people were limited by whether or not they could get to New York for campus, but now you can interact with more alumni, more current students virtually. Next slide, please. So this piece is also very key, right? So we have professional clubs, we have affinity and social clubs, and we have a number of ways to engage with the community, right? So if you're on our campus for the next 2 years, what professional clubs are you going to join? What affinity or social clubs will you join, right? Which clubs are you going to be active in? Which ones are you going to contribute to? Where are you going to add value? Next slide, please. 47,000 alums, and you can see where they all are. And I'll just go to the next slide. And still next slide, right? Now, one of the key and important things is kind of figuring out how you're going to tap into the resources that will help you professionally as you start working on the next steps to achieve your career goals, right? So we have one-on-one advising. We just became a STEM school. So if you're not from the US, that gives you more flexibility in terms of staying in the US post-graduation. So again, spend some time looking at the resources that are going to be helpful to your career, and get a sense of which ones you're going to kind of tap into as part of your due diligence before you actually start writing essays. Next slide. And this is the funding piece. I also want people to kind of spend some time on the financial aid portion of the website as well, and getting a sense of, like, one, how am I going to fund this, and two, what need-based scholarships are available, and also get a sense of the merit-based fellowships that are available as well. And then the last thing I want to say for those who are not from the US is that it is possible to get loans up to the full cost of attendance. Next slide. This to me is probably the most important slide that I'm sharing with you today, because the students who are part of the Columbia community, they're a wonderful resource. And we have about 250 student volunteers who are part of what we call our Hermes Society. And you can search for them by what they want to do or area of focus. You can search for them by the professional or social clubs that they're involved with. You can search for them by where they're from and so on. And one of the things that many students find helpful as part of their diligence is having maybe a couple of virtual coffee chats with current students that have a similar background or trying to make a similar transition to what you want to make. So this is key and important because you want to get a real understanding for the people who want to do something similar to what you want to do. What is their experience like at Columbia? What resources have they found to be most helpful to them? So that's a key and important thing as part of your diligence. Next slide. And still next slide. Yeah, perfect. Now, I want to spend just a couple of minutes here talking about what we look for, right? And I've been stressing the importance of diligence because I would say about 15 to 20% of the applicants that I see don't do that, and they write and submit generic applications that can literally apply to any schools. And one thing that I say is that there is a big difference between a strong applicant and a strong application. Sometimes there are strong applicants who have their first choice school in mind and literally like phone it in where they don't do much work for a school that they consider to be a safety school where that they think they're automatically going to get admitted to. And there's something to be said about being humble in this process, because hubris is also a mistake that I see too many applicants make, where they make an assumption that just because they have strong grades and test scores, that they're going to be an automatic person to be admitted, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I started tracking this in the last couple of years, and every year we turn down about 700 people at the very least who have test scores 750 and above. So what that means, if we wanted to, we could easily find a class that has a GMAT average of over 750, but that would not be the best class. So academic strength is something that's key and important for us. We will look at your undergraduate record. We will look at your standardized test. But the key question for us, though, is that we want to make sure that anyone that we admit will be okay in what is a demanding and rigorous academic environment. So we're looking for real examples of intellectual curiosity. But to me, the most important aspect on this is our assessment of your professional promise. So if I could give some specific advice on the resume, the other mistake that I see far too often is that the resumes that I see are list of duties and responsibilities when you should focus more on impact. And when I look at resumes, what I'm looking for is just like context and color on how you are doing relative to your peer group. So to me, the strong applicant does more, achieves more with the same set of resources. So if they work for a company that ranks its employees, what you would find is that they're ranked in the top 5 to 10% of the employees. And that's how their recommenders tend to view them as well. If they work for a company that doesn't rank its employees, what you will find is that they tend to work on the key and important projects that are central to the firm. They tend to be promoted on an accelerated pace. So when you're submitting resumes, when you provide that kind of color and context, where like if you say something that says like I was ranked in the top 5% of the analysts at my level, or I was one of only 3 people out of 100 who had the opportunity to be on this core team that went to Europe as a part of our expansion strategy. And I was the youngest person at my level who had that opportunity. Like those kinds of things, those kinds of bullets provide more context. And then if that's reinforced by your recommenders, then that gives us a sense of your potential as well. And then we also want people who are truly multidimensional and well-rounded, right? So that's kind of the core things. Like, are we convinced that the person could do the work? Are we convinced that the person who's the applicant is going to continue to achieve his or her goals at a very high level? And you could make an evidence-based argument as to why. Do they maximize and take full advantage of every opportunity presented to them? And then do they also create their own opportunities as well? And then are they interesting and well-rounded? You know, do we see them as someone who is going to be a value add to our campus? And then the last thing that I'll say on this slide, right, is that if you speak to current students at Columbia, they will say they learn just as much from their classmates as their professors. So when you think about who you are and what you've done and accomplished professionally and personally, where will your classmates learn most from you? So before you start writing any essays, you have to be able to ask yourself, like, what is going to be my value add, and what will my classmates learn most from me? Next slide. Okay, and this slide here just gives you a sense of what the key dates are and so on. So right now, people should know that we only have rolling admissions at Columbia, which means that we read and review the applications in the order that we get them. And we make decisions in terms of who to admit in that order as well. Right now, we're only reviewing the people who applied early decision, which is a binding process, and the people who are applying for the January term. And you can see the deadlines there, that's October 2nd. And typically we see the bulk of the applications for the J term and early decision come, like, I would say within the last 2 weeks prior to the deadline. And because the bulk of our applicants still are applying regular decision, that there isn't this crush to apply at the top or the early part of early decision, because there's always space in the class at that time, either for the J term and also for early decision as well. So there's no crush. But certainly after we get to regular decision, the earlier one applies is to your advantage. But we still, I would say, get the bulk of our applications for the entire cycle. I'd say December through the first week of January. So people definitely want to be eligible for our preference for the merit fellowship deadline, which is January 6th. And the final deadline is always within the the first week of April. At this point, we don't anticipate extending the application deadline as we did last year because of COVID. I mean, we hope that we'll be in a much better place. But again, we will let the public health experts kind of dictate how we act in admissions. And then the last thing I will say before we get to questions, right, is that this year has been a very different year for all of us, and there have been tons of surprises. So when we actually extended this cycle in March, if you had asked me that almost 90% of the people that we admitted would physically be in New York City to start the class in August, I would have taken that bet and lost it, because I thought that many of our international students, one, would withdraw. They didn't in the way that we thought. And I also thought that people would stay in their home countries or home cities, because New York City can be relatively more expensive than many other cities all across the world. But the fact is, the people that we admitted, literally as soon as they were able to, got their visas processed pretty much as soon as consulate offices were open, and they basically got to New York City as quickly as possible. And it's been again mostly virtual so far, but still an amazing experience for the people that we've brought in. And we definitely know that there's tension, because there are people who still prefer the real environment as opposed to the virtual environment. And as a person, I prefer the real environment as opposed to virtual environment as well. But we're definitely doing the best that we can. And we definitely still, no matter what format you get your curriculum, We want to make sure that the Columbia degree still has the same value, if not more, going forward. That is our commitment to our students, to our alumni, that we'll keep on going forward, but we will respect and we'll value the integrity of the degree. And with that, I think we can kind of close out the screen, and I can start answering questions.
Okay. Okay. All right, Michael.
Yeah.
We got some really good questions coming in. Let me start. While I'm figuring it out, let me give you the first question because we have a lot.
Okay.
Is there a way for me to know why I was rejected the first time I applied? Several reapplicant questions here. Is there a way for me to know why I was rejected the first time I applied?
Not in most instances, not directly. But so essentially, like if you called me and so on, because we don't have the bandwidth to basically do these application reviews. So what would happen is that like we would tell the person to look at the profile, and sometimes there's simple answers where someone has either test scores or grades way outside what is typical. And sometimes that's the reason. But most of the people that we see who apply are strong. Sometimes it's just a timing thing. So if I were talking to a reapplicant to maximize that person's chances, I would definitely recommend applying early decision. Oh, good. Now I got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Perfect. All right. Now, since this is not a big group, what I can do is that like just reach out to me directly and as a reapplicant, so you can send me an email and I will speak to you. But let me be clear though, like when I'm talking to reapplicants, I don't go back to committee notes, so that's a private thing. So that I never do that, right? But essentially, like I can talk to themes in essays. I can look at your resume and so on, and I will say, okay, well, based on my assessment of your profile, this is what I see to be a potential flag, and so on, and this is how you might want to address that. So that's the most that I'll do, but I will never talk about, well, on February 1st, the committee met at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and so on. And they said like that will not happen, right? But what will happen if you connect with me is that like I can talk about, I would ask you to tell me, well, what was your GPA? What were your test scores? I mean, send me your resume and so on. And I can talk to you about what I saw as potential concerns. And again, I've been doing this for 18 years. So I don't get surprised very often in terms of applicant profiles. So I think I can give you a pretty solid assessment of what could have been a possible concern.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. And this is also from an anonymous attendee, what features, attributes do you look for regarding extracurricular activities?
So you find I kind of speak in a very direct way, right? There's a reason why people basically
That's why we love having you on, Michael.
People ask for timelines for extracurricular activities, and pretty much 18 months to a year before someone applies, there is a surge in activity because people think like, well, if I feed the homeless every Tuesday and Thursday, I will look really nice. And it's like, no, that's not the goal, right? All we want is people who are well-rounded people, people who are multidimensional, right? So I would say like, what's important to you, right? And the people who typically are strong candidates for top MBA programs have demanding jobs, demanding lives, and so on. But it's important for them to have some sense of balance in their life. So like, what gives you balance? So lots of folks, they like to travel. We're seeing more foodies, and everyone does yoga now, right? So it's like, that's perfectly fine, right? Like extracurricular activities has not been something that's been determinative in an application process, because lots of people that they have demanding jobs where they can count the weekends where they didn't work. So that person would not be penalized because they have a super demanding job, which doesn't allow them to do other things. But then I looked to the kind of person that you were when you were in college. Like, are you going to be involved in a meaningful way on our community despite being busy? And people that we'd like just find ways to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. What should a reapplicant focus on while drafting that essay, the reapplicant essay?
Focus on how you've on the growth, right? And if part of the reason for the rejection, and you would know this, is that, like, because based on think about what I'm saying today, if you were that person who didn't do enough diligence, where you didn't engage with people from the community, you didn't do any of the events, so the reader did not see that kind of engagement, like that should be part of the reapplicant story. So when I'm looking at your story, this person, one, has improved as a professional, but then they also like deepen their sense of engagement with Columbia and so on, and that the fit conversation in the essays seems more powerful, more sincere, more real.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another anonymous attendee asked, can I send LORs within 15 days of sending the application? My suspicion is that's within 15 days after, but how does that
After
work?
the application. All right, so the way it works, right, is that, like, if there is an element of the application that we need, that we don't have, essentially your application in our system is tagged as incomplete. So then we will say, Linda, we need your recs. Can you send them to us and so on? And they say, well, I'm still waiting for this manager who's always late on everything and so on. And you always have these, like, and they're getting desperate. Oh my God, So, but it doesn't move until we have all the elements that we need.
Okay, great. From Jair. Hi, Michael. Linda, greetings from Peru. Michael, what would you say is the main advantage or implication of the new STEM designation for international students?
I would say just more flexibility, in terms of like being able to kind of stay in the U.S. Longer, without that designation. So I think that's the primary benefit. Our dean, Kostas Maglaris, is someone who believes that management science is a critical part of leadership. So there are a lot more data classes anyway, even independent of the STEM designation. So that's where we were going anyway. And there are many people who believe, like, a better understanding of data and analytics is going to be a critical piece of leadership. So we were going in that direction anyway, but so it's just like, it's convenient on many ends.
Right.
But to me, that's the future, and the reality, though, is that, like, we're trying to create leaders who will win their future, and that's part of that future.
Makes sense. All right, thank you. We've had a couple of questions asking how many people were deferred from the entering class of 2020, and how will that affect those applying for the class of 2021?
Not much, because one, it was several dozen, not hundreds,
Okay. Okay.
and then the bulk of those people were deferred to the January start, and then that class is going to be bigger. So it's so in terms of the capacity, it's a wash. Now, having said that, though, I think the better question to me is, like, what do you think is going to happen with the overall pool? And
Good.
Everyone in the space, just based on prior history, where when you have downturns that are sudden, there's always a big surge in applications. So based on the numbers, it's going to be competitive, but it may not be more competitive in terms of strong applications. So remember what I said before, there's a difference between a strong applicant and a strong application. So if someone says, oh my God, like the job prospects in my industry are becoming more negative and so on, so I'm gonna just like rush off an application right now and get into business school. If you rush an application and you don't do the diligence, then you're not going to get the results that you expect, right? So I think it's important to put the work in, right? So while I expect us to have more applications, I don't know how many of those are going to be like rushed and not well done applications. But the math is going to look, bad for applicants, but I'm not sure if the end result won't be the same.
Got it. All right. Thank you. We have a question here. What is the best way to connect with current students or alumni at CBS?
So the alumni piece is harder, but the current students. So I showed you a slide that had with like chat with the current student, and then there was like this thing that said like the Hermes students. That's HERMES. So there are about 250 volunteers, and you can search for them by what they want to do, what professional clubs they're involved with, what social clubs they're involved with. Where they're from. And again, I strongly recommend that you're trying to have a couple of conversations. There's student chats, and then there's also like tons of events that the professional clubs do that non-students can participate in. And there you might find an alum who encourages prospective students to reach out to them. So for privacy reasons, I don't give alumni information to perspectives, but once we're admitted, then the connections like happen on a regular basis. Okay, so start with the
students. Exactly. Okay. Another anonymous question: would I get financial aid scholarship decision at admission if I apply in the early decision round?
I say 90% no, right? So one of the things with early decision, right, is that yes, while it does give you an advantage in one learning about your outcome, the downside is that like you apply before our financial aid merit process really gets underway. So we tend to look at the folks who applied by that January 6th deadline and then make the big merit-based decisions. There are times where we make exceptions, but those are really exceptions. So that's the downside, right? So if I were talking and advising a candidate where they felt that they had a really strong application, I would say apply regular decision, but in the earlier part of regular decision, right? So applying, I'd say by mid-December is perfectly fine. But if I had the resources and there was an aspect of my application where like there was a job loss for an extended period, or I have a strong test score, but I really struggled in my final year of college and so on for a variety of reasons because I wasn't mature enough and so on. So my profile doesn't look as strong. And I say, something, I just need to get in, right? So there are folks where they're like, everyone thinks that they're the best applicant, and that like, yes, I know that only 25% of the people at your school get a major fellowship, but I'm in the top 25% of everything, so I'm automatically a lock. And that's not always the case, right? Yeah. And then there's some people who say, okay, well, I just want to get in, and I know that there's this aspect of my application that might be seen as a negative, so I just want to maximize my chances, right? Now, having said all of that, right, at Columbia, there are two funding pieces. One is the merit that admissions office controls, but then there's a piece just as large that's need-based, right? And people, even people who have solid pre-MBA jobs are still getting need-based awards, right? And then we also look at where people are from. So for example, I do a lot of work in Southeast Asia. if you make $20,000 in Thailand, that's a good salary. But $20,000 a year in New York City is not a good salary, right? So we take these things into account. I can say the things for many emerging markets as well. So we're trying to help as many people who need the financial assistance to actually come to the program. So that's part of diversity for us, where people say diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's part of the equity piece and the inclusion piece.
Okay, thank you again. Okay, we have a question from Luis. What is CBS thoughts in terms of older applicants, 32 at matriculation? Do you consider it as a disadvantage, or would it be okay to wait to get a stronger letter of recommendation from a client? Coming from family business and this, I assume that means getting recommendations has been the hardest part.
Well, today I just admitted someone for our program who was 33 from Russia, right? So, and he was so excited, right?
Yeah, I bet.
You know, and let me be clear. You're talking to someone who went to Columbia, and I think I was like 33 or 34 when I started, right? So,
okay.
so I would say about 15% of the class, 10% of the class is in their 30s. So you'll have people in their late 30s, sometimes in their 40s. The record, I think, is 64. That's a one-year outlier, let me be clear, but that's the record. But coming from someone who applied as someone in their 30s and got in, I have a bias towards that person as well. I mean, you know, we're because the thing is, like,
gotta stick together.
but not only that though, is that like sometimes when you're like 26 and 27, you've had a really good 4-year career and so on, and you're applying to school and so on. But there's something to be said for overcoming a setback, and then how did that help you as a person, as a leader? And to me, the best leaders have never had perfect lives, right? You know, where like you thought that this thing, the way you thought when you're 23, like, this is what I'm going to do for the next 20 years. And then 3 years later, it's like, you know, actually, I need to make a pivot to do something else because that was the wrong path or whatever. And you're trying to make a transition. So there's something to be said for additional maturity, more context, that just makes a class better to me, right? So I think it's a positive. Now, having said that, we don't see many people who are in their mid to late 30s apply because of perceptions that they feel like, well, I'm too old for this. And then the other thing I would say is that often they don't apply because sometimes they have like families and so on. So it's harder for them to basically start the full-time program. So they will say, okay, well, I'll go part-time or do one of the executive MBA programs because I have these family obligations that I need to basically still maintain while going to school. So there are different options regardless of what your age cohort is.
Okay. You're going to love the next question. We got it from a couple of people, I think. Hi, Michael. How important is the GMAT in the admissions process?
It's important, but it's not the most important thing, because remember what I said, right? Like, over 700 people every year have scored 750 who did not get admitted. I read someone right before I started this webinar, and this person had a 780, and I said reject, right? And I'll tell you why. Because if you take the score away from that person that I read, there was little accomplishment, and there was little in the way of demonstrated leadership, right? So for us, it's not a test score contest, right? It's more about like thinking about that person 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and so on, and what you expect that person is going to accomplish. And the reality is that many of the very best leaders were never the people that had the best test scores, the best grades, and so on, but they're really good at life, you know, and we're trying to find a balance of people who are intellectually curious, who are good at life, who are good at leading, and so on, and those are key things. Now, one of the thing I would say though, right, is that you want to have like balance, where like the question you answer is like, am I curious intellectually, right? Do I like to learn, and so on, and convince us that yes, my test scores are lower, but as a reader, I get the sense that this person is going to be okay in the classroom, and they made an evidence case as to why.
Okay, thank you. Will asks, can you explain more about the nuances of the rolling admissions? If a student is accepted, do they need to provide an answer within a certain time frame?
Yeah, typical is like 2 weeks, right? So it's
Regular decision and early
no no
decisions
no no
also.
early decision. Is that what you
He
said?
wasn't asking specifically about early decision.
Oh yeah, yeah. So if it's early decision, it's a truncated timeline and so on. So it's very quick. Now, depending on and this is on our website, but depending on when you apply, you get a sense like if you apply by then, this is when the deposit deadline is. But typically, right, is that like you will have a deposit deadline in February and the deposit deadline in April. And typically it's about a week to 10 days after we have our admin weekend. So that's a good rule of thumb. So we'll give people an opportunity to engage with the admin community and so on, and then make a decision. Now the other question is like, okay, well, I got into 3 schools. Can I play the schools against each other and so on, and then say, okay, well, can you give me an extra month so I can basically go to the other school I'm getting admitted to? And that doesn't work. So
Right.
so schools have their timelines and so on, and you just have to kind of respect the timelines of the schools.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question here. What is a good process to follow when reflecting and deciding your essay topic structures? Any advice on how to approach these and how much time to dedicate here?
All right. So yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, yeah, but I think people should be thinking about essays all the time. I mean, and let me be clear, right? So it's not about an essay, because an essay is just you sharing a narrative. I think for young people, young at heart people, I think people need to be thoughtful and reflective about like how do I become my best self, right? What are the knowledge gaps that I have? So you want to be that person where like you're 70 but you're still learning, right? I remember like my dad, just to kind of get personal for a second, like I remember him moving to Mexico City to work and learning Spanish at 55, right? And it's like, okay, I don't want to do that, right? So but I'm just saying, like, are you curious about something? And that's going to extend no matter how old you're always learning. So you look at a Warren Buffett, he's like 80 years old and so on, but he's like
He's
curious and
90.
all, 90 years old. Sorry, my bad, right? But still, like, he's like young 90, right?
Right.
But the key thing, right, is that like, like always learning, always curious and so on, and that's the key thing. And they're always kind of being introspective, and figuring out like how to get better at something. So to me, that's an ongoing process. And then to close this question, what I'd say, right, is don't think about your life in terms of jobs, but think about your career in this way, right? So like if you had to kind of work on a problem for the next 15 to 20 years, what problem intrigues you? So no matter what you do, technology is going to disrupt and change that. But we will still have to figure out how to get from place to place. We will still have to figure out what to eat, what to
How
wear,
to
and so
breathe.
on. Yeah, exactly. So what intrigues you? Like what service or product intrigues you, and so on. What answer do you want to provide for people around you? And then no matter what happens from a technology perspective, like you're still solving or working on that problem. So the job will change over time, but the problem you're solving is still kind of the same kind of problem, and that's kind of helpful to some people, that approach.
Okay. Another question from anonymous attendee. How does not having a big brand on your resume in terms of work experience affect your chances of admission?
Again, keeping it personal, because I worked for myself prior to business school, and my company was called Robinson and Company, and I was the Robinson, right? But the thing I would say though is that like I was fortunate enough in the music business to work for people who had won Grammys and sold millions of records and so on. So you still kind of worked with powerful brands despite being a part of a very small company. So there definitely was no name there. So like, are you doing important work, right, as opposed to the brand, right? Are you doing impactful work, right? That could be more important than the brand. And all thing I would say, right, is that sometimes we tend to view experience based on global companies, but I'm sure people on this call are from other countries, and the big brand in your country may be unknown to me in New York, right? But again, like this company is critical to providing clean water in the country where I'm from, or providing this service, or we are the top telecommunications company in the city where I'm from, and so on. So the brand might not be one that I would know, but the work that you're doing is still impactful and so on, and it's context. So for me, to kind of give you another admissions trick, is that like when I look at people who are not from the US, right? The kind of words and phrases that excite me are phrases and words that give me context. That says, okay, well, I see this person being one of the top leaders in Latin America over the next 20 years. Right. And again, I don't know the brand sometimes, but the person is doing work that's impactful, and the recommender, who's a practitioner who has expertise in that space, is providing context that helps me, where you get a sense like, oh, well, this person is going to be a top leader in that city, in that country in 10, 15 years. You can make an evidence case based as to why. And again, we can say, oh, that's a Columbia person, you know? So we're looking for those things as well.
And I think I like the fact that you keep emphasizing it has to be evidence-based. It's not just a matter of claiming that you're going to be a leader in South America in 20 years.
Yeah.
It's providing the evidence so that you, the reader, comes to that conclusion.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes, that is very true. Which is why I was very specific when I said the recommender who has expertise within that space gives context because like everyone says like I am so awesome, right? You know, and I get it, you know, and like I know I said I'm kind of short for time, but I think I can go for like to 2:10, so I can give an extra 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you, because I was just going to bring it to a close. Thank you.
Yes. I'll just close that. But because since I mentioned Warren Buffett, sometimes I used to see applicants, right, that I'm going to be the next Warren Buffett, right? But again, Warren Buffett was Warren Buffett before he was Warren Buffett, and there's something I used to say all the time, where like if you see Warren Buffett at 7, it's like starting to read books about bonds, and then by the time he's 10, like, this is my favorite book about bonds. And I've never met a 10-year-old person who said, this is my favorite book about bonds, right? So the point is that like I don't really believe in accidental greatness. You know, I believe it's something that requires a great deal of work, and it's not just about making a declaration. Is that like from a Bill Gates to a Warren Buffett, they were doing things that young people that their peers just weren't doing, right? Which goes back to what I want to look for in the resume, where like, are you taking full advantage of every opportunity that you have? And then are you doing more with the same opportunity set than your peer group? So you're a star, but then are you a team player? Do you lead with humility? Do you have a record of helping others, supporting others, developing others as well? So those things. So they're like, you're a superstar, a budding superstar, but there's a sense of humility about you as well, where it's not only about you and your achievement. Like you bring others with you as you go along.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Okay, here's another question. How would you categorize the record-breaking 7,000 applications in the previous application cycle? Do you see that number going beyond that for this cycle?
I don't know. So
honest answer.
No, let me tell you why, right? Because like if you look at a number of schools, right, and because remember what I said about humility, right? So some people's like, well, we have 20% more applications because we're like brilliant, and said, well, but then other schools that also had the same deadline as us also saw a significant increase in the applications, right? So was the increase driven by people accelerating their applications, right? And then they're gone from the cycle, or is it something that's going to last? I think that it's going to last, and I expect to see, I would say, industry-wide, a 5 to 10% increase overall. That's what I believe. But
from last year,
yeah, from I believe that because and again, that 7,000 number includes people from the J term. It includes the people who applied in August, and it also includes the new deferred enrollment program and so on, where that's where we're seeing the most growth, right? But even if you just look at the people who applied just for the August piece, it's still double digit, right? So I still expect to see a double-digit increase across the fall application cycle. I believe that, but I could be wrong, right? But one of the things that if I was advising someone applying to schools now, I would advise someone to prepare themselves for a double-digit increase in application volume, right? So based on the numbers, it's going to be competitive. So that requires more work, more diligence, more engagement with alums where possible, going to as many of the events relevant to you as well, and being really intentional about the schools you apply to, the schools that you commit to, and so on. So anyone who admits you and reads your application will feel and say, this person will add value to our community, and she's laid it out here in the application. She's smart, she's interesting, dynamic, and just a person with proven potential, right? So expect it to be more competitive and do things to maximize your chances. And again, like if my test scores or GPA were significantly outside the range, I would apply early, right? Because then I like to me the funding piece, because since the majority of people don't get the big awards, like then you might have to think, well, it might just be getting admitted, right?
Right.
So you have to basically understand the trade-offs.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a question here from Srishti. I apologize if I mispronounced the name here. How do CBS students interact with the New York corporate community at large? That's a good question.
Well, they were going, well, pre-COVID, they were, they're interacting with them for coffee chats, for informationals. A large number of folks were doing in-semester internships. There are ways for student clubs to basically do independent consulting projects with companies as well, and so on. So it was part of our ecosystem where like you got many opportunities to engage with people in person. I remember like talking to a young woman who was doing investment banking recruiting, and she said that before her offer, she actually had like 30 meetings with people.
Wow.
You know, and you know, and I'm not, yeah. But the thing though is like, okay, well, you know, she wanted to do banking and so on, but she was very intentional. Where like okay, well, who's on the team, right? You know, like how's the team structured and so on. Like what's the culture of the team and so on. So it's like, so she wanted to basically talk to like tons of people, and then if you're having like 22 meetings before the interviews, then you know when you come to the interviews, like she's good, right? You know, now there's a downside, right? Because like the people, there's time, right? But to me, having done this for a while, I see lots of folks who are totally convinced that like the thing that I wrote in my application, I'm 100% committed to it and so on, and that's what I'm going to do for the next 20, 30 years and so on. And then in 2 years, they're gone to a new job, right? That happens over and over again because sometimes people haven't really been that thoughtful, and they're kind of focused on like, I need to get this job, as opposed to no, like I need to basically achieve success in the way I define it, where I'm kind of working on the problems that excite me with the people who interest me and so on. So I feel good about what I do day to day, as opposed to like the goal is to get a job. The goal is never to get a job. The goal is to basically achieve some sort of dream. So to me,
Right.
No dream schools, just dreams.
Okay, we have a question here, and this probably will be the last one. From Abhishek, you mentioned that international students were expected to cancel their admit for the class of 2022, the one that just entered. However, that didn't happen. Do you believe the same this year? Also, does this thinking have any bearing when the offers are made to international students in the first place?
Well, the reality, right, is that like that's what we thought, but it didn't happen, right? I mean, Linda was on a webinar that we did like in May and so on, where we thought like we're gonna lose like 40% of our class, right?
That's right.
So
that's exactly what Amanda said, right?
So like, because it's the world is upside down and so on. But the thing is that like humans have always been more resilient than what people would expect, right? So it's like, so when the people who we admitted were thoughtful and intentional about their application, and they wanted to start business school at this time, right? So people did amazing things where oh, my consulate opened like literally like a couple of weeks before orientation, and they're there the first day and so on, and they accelerated every process to make it happen. So we didn't have the withdrawals that we thought we would. And then more important, as I said to you, like not only did they get the visa, but they got to New York really quickly, right? So if we're talking about like close to 90% already in New York City, that says something, right?
Oh yeah,
commitment. Yes. So they want this, right? And the reality is that, like, because the pandemic is global, it's like, okay, well, do I want to be riding out the pandemic at work in an uncertain environment, or do I want to be in school? And the majority of people said, I want to be in school.
Yeah.
And I will do everything necessary to make it happen. And I hope that we'll get to a much better place. But the thing is, like, people want to go forward, and they want to make the best of every opportunity. And that's kind of the kind of people that we want. So yes, it's COVID is affecting the world and so on, but I'm not going to basically just like sit at home and twiddle my thumbs and so on. I mean, I still want to create the best life possible for me and my family, and I'm going to go forward. And I think that Columbia can be helpful to me in this regard.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful answer. One last really quick question, and then I will bring it to a close. I want to be respectful of your time. And that is, this came from a few people. Do you have any preference for the GMAT versus the GRE or the executive assessment, which you're also accepting?
What I say, right, is that most people still do the GMAT, but we're seeing more growth in GREs. And if you think about the way people in our ecosystem talk about schools and test scores and so on, like everyone tends to focus on the GMAT score, and not so much GREs, and certainly not executive assessments, right?
Right.
So then if I knew that I wouldn't get the best possible score, I would basically do a test that didn't have the same kind of attention. So I would do a GRE or executive assessment. But if you have like a test score from a GMAT already above whatever the median score of a school that you're looking at and so on, and keep it, that's fine, right? But there are people who are struggling. So if I was like struggling with standardized tests and so on, I would basically do something where it didn't have the same kind of light shown on it. That's what I would do.
Right. But you, as you evaluate, you don't have a preference. Am I
No.
correct?
No.
Okay. I think that's excellent advice.
I don't care, right? But I'm saying that, like,
I understand what you're saying.
Yes. So people, like admissions officers, I think across the board, right, was like, oh, this person had a 550 GMAT, which is really low for most of the top 10 schools. But people don't talk about like a 550 equivalent GRE score in the same way. They just don't.
Right.
They just don't, right?
Right.
So
and they don't even know what it is in the EA.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right. All right. Well, again, Michael, there are thank yous coming in the chat window, and they have been throughout. I want to thank you very, very much for this wonderful presentation. I want to thank all the attendees who've been here for your time, your attention, and of course, your questions. You're going to get a survey on your way out. We value your feedback. Please, please take a minute to fill it out. You can review this webinar in a couple of days. You'll get a link to the recording. So again, if you want to review it, Michael's given some fantastic insight here, and you probably will want to review it. So look out for that email. And otherwise, again, thank you again. Best of luck with your applications. Michael, thank you again.
Thank you.
11:11 my time, so I'm 1 minute over. Yes. I'm gonna let you go. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much. This has
Linda.
been fantastic. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everybody.